Good evening and welcome to the Psychic Call Shop. I'm Aeson Knight, and of course, I'm sitting down with my techie with the mostest, Techie Joe. How are you, darling?
I'm doing well. How are you this evening?
Evil is normal, raging is normal, but hey, it is Tuesday, so we're going to do this like a coffee shop. Now, me and Hazel talked about a new platform opening up, and we said it would be on Sunday. After meeting with the techs today, we've decided to push back the launch until it is up to my standard.
Yeah. Yeah, there were a few things and it's there. It's almost there. It's so
Right.
close.
Right.
But it would be one of those things that like they can release it
Mm-hmm.
and in 3 to 4 weeks you could have the rest of it,
No.
or you can wait 3 to 4 weeks and have all of it. So, it was kind of one of those decisional moments of like, let's wait.
Right.
Yeah. So it's a coming.
It's on its way.
Yeah.
You know, we'll get there.
Yeah, it'll get there. It'll get there.
And this happens in development. It can be a lot of things.
But yeah. No. So it's not gonna be the Christmas present you were hoping
No.
for. But I think it makes well, no, it's not quite Chinese New Year either. Because that's not
It
till what,
may be
April?
an astrologer's new year. We'll see. We'll see.
There you go. Little gift there.
But little gift there. Yes. Yes. All right. So I want to dig right into it. I don't know if you guys missed the judge getting attacked. I know we talked about a man attacking the judge.
I mean, we can jump right there.
Yeah, let's jump right there because he got sentenced.
All right, judge attacker sentenced to 26 years in prison insists he's not evil. The man who attacked a judge by leaping over the bench during a sentencing hearing for another case earlier this year has been sentenced to 26 years in prison for the brazen act. Uh, Deborah Redden attacked lost or Dio. Oh, that's interesting. I'm trying to figure out how to pronounce the name when it is male, not female. Diobra?
Yeah.
Deobra? Diobra
Yes.
Redding? Or Diobra Redden attacked Las Vegas District Court Judge Mary Kay Holthus on January 3rd this year in an incident captured on video from the courtroom. But it was District Court Judge Susan Johnson who sentenced him Tuesday, saying the attack was an assault on the entire judiciary. Prosecutors asked Johnson for substantial prison time, while Redden's attorneys suggested his sentence be served concurrently with his existing time behind bars from the attempted battery case, the case Judge Holthus was sentencing him for when he attacked her. According to reports, Judge Johnson denied the request to serve the time concurrently and sentenced Redden to a term of 26 to 65 years with credit for time served. He'll reportedly be up for parole sometime in the 2050s. Redden spoke out during sentencing, insisting he's not an evil person and that he's had problems since he was a kid. Well, he will have many, many, many years to work those.
Yes. This is like they're going on that he had to go through a competency hearing, which is understandable. But he flies up. Like I get, I have seen people fly over desks before. I've been in situations where I've flown over desks before. This dude got some air and apparently done a lot of damage to the judge, the court clerk, which was very animated in his testimony. Matter of fact, his testimony closed the case because it became a plea deal almost instantly after that. Um,
Yeah.
and then just aggravated. Um, there was like 4 bailiffs injured in this. Like, this dude was wild. There's no question in my mind that he wouldn't have killed that judge.
I mean, I'm currently loading the video to see this one. I mean, it just sounds horrific when it's, like, to go from your normal courtroom, which is very much how this video starts. It's very like calm day in the courthouse. Like, everyone's exchanging pleasantries and doing their courthouse thing. And then he is literally leapt just airtime over the bench. Jesus. And
yeah, like, this is the reason I think some judges need to have bulletproof cages, they say, on, especially family court. Like, that's where I feel like things are even more dangerous.
Have a higher likelihood of volatility, definitely.
Yes.
But at the same time, like, this isn't a normal. Granted, there are lots of incidents that occur, but it's literally not what you expect for a normal day in court, which is everything of what this looked like. Because there's some lead up video before he attacks, and it does. It just, like, there's no warning, there's no indicators really. It's just 1 minute he's standing there, the next minute he is flying through the air. Like, it's absolutely unbelievable.
And I'm going to say this: Las Vegas is set up for this. Like, it was on tape. There is no way that he could have gotten away with it. Like, they do it right. They film and release the courtroom. So,
like, and literally everyone just has the most shocked expression.
Yeah.
Oh God, and she's like hobbling away.
Yeah.
Like, oh wow.
Yeah. Like, he does major
oriented. She doesn't know what's going on. Like, what the hell just happened?
Right.
Like,
and you don't think, or at least most people wouldn't think.
I mean, what are you going to achieve?
Right.
You know what I mean? And so, not to mention, though, if we start doing, bulletproof cages for judges, at what point do we just, like, we bulletproof cage the defense table, we bulletproof the prosecution table, we bulletproof the judge, we bulletproof the gallery? Like,
well, I think that the gallery needs to be very limited with full streaming. I think that we may need to look at the British and how they keep their defendants in a box. Like, the defendant has his box in the well.
Well, but what I was basically trying to get at was the idea that it would almost potentially, like, everyone's supposed to be safer until they're not.
Right.
You know what I mean? Is that it then once everyone's in a box, then it is actually harder to get to people when something happens.
Right.
Like, now you have to start worrying not about, someone physically attacking you, but what happens if, somehow they release, like, a gas. Like,
correct.
You know what I mean? Like, you start getting into different scenarios that are even worse. I don't want to say that I prefer a defendant attacking a judge like this.
No.
But it may be preferable to the nightmares that could ensue when everyone's in, the boxes.
All right. But also, and this is one of those modern courtrooms. And I don't like them. I like the ones where the judges are a little bit higher. There is a clear defense table, there is a clear prosecutor's table, and there is a rail between the gallery in the well.
Oh, yeah. Though he wasn't coming from the gallery, was he? Like, he was
No, he was
already...
behind the defense table.
Right.
And
I mean, so
apparently
he's
was
already
right
had to
up.
clear one obstacle,
Right.
which was the defense table,
Mm-hmm.
to then clear a second obstacle, which
Mhm.
was... I mean, I'm just thinking, I don't think your average defendant
Right.
was going to have the ability.
Right.
I will say that at the point in which they brought him in, because the video does overlapping coverage,
Right.
both of the original incident and then his court appearance
Right.
for the sentencing, he is very well incapable of doing anything
Mhm.
in his sentencing on attacking the judge.
Right.
Like, he's completely shackled down.
Right.
But yeah.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. I mean, and again, I don't get what you think you're going to accomplish.
Right.
Like, express your outrage. Like, and then add 26 years.
Mm-hmm. At least.
Like, dude, was it worth it? Like, I'm not saying you had it, all going easy, and maybe you thoroughly felt like you got railroaded and you didn't deserve this, and yada.
Yeah, and this was already a parole violation.
Yeah,
but there is one,
but you
two,
added 26 years,
3. Three people trying to hold him back from attacking this judge. And one is just railing on him. And then there's his useless lawyer just standing there going, stop, 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 stop. There is no reason why the security has gotten so high.
Hey, Brenda. Hey, Shannon.
Hey, Brendan. Hi, Shannon.
Yeah.
Hey, Blue. We know you're watching. But things you don't think about. The height of a judge's bench.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if that judge's bench was another foot higher, like it is in the historical court, then
he might not have made it across. But
exactly,
yeah, like maybe.
Mm-hmm. Like, that was the whole reason for these these very high judges things, was to block attacks.
I just don't think we expect that anymore. Like, you know what I mean?
I know. It's not normal to be expecting it.
No. Nor, like, I don't see anything wrong with not expecting it.
Right.
Like, it's just the dumbest point.
Right.
At the point in which you're in the courthouse.
Right.
In front of multiple sworn officers of the court, there's no version of that,
right,
that makes it a good idea to go after a judge.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you and I think the unexpected on this one was, like, again, it just looked like this was any other day at the courthouse. Like,
mm-hmm.
you've already because that was a sentencing too, was it not?
Yes, that was a sentencing. He took a plea deal there.
Yeah. Like, you've already taken a plea deal. Like, what are you doing?
Exactly.
Like, I get it was a battery case, but still.
Mm-hmm. Like, why? I don't get why he did this. There's no reason for it. This is senseless violence. According to him, he's had problems since childhood. Where's the therapy notes?
Like, if you want to blame anyone or say anything to anyone, like, I think his defense attorney missed a wonderful opportunity for shaving down his plea deal.
Yeah.
With a lot of mental health care. But other than that, and even then, it's like, you've already accepted the plea. You already knew what the judge was going to say.
Right.
Like, what would... Again, this should have been any other day in the courthouse.
Right.
So, yeah, that's a wild case.
It's one of the ones that I sit back and watch. It's like Diane Feinstein's case. I'm watching it. There's 2 new defense attorneys because the judge had to throw both of her attorneys off the case. And apparently it has now been, anything they worked on has now been considered fruit from the poisonous tree.
Oh, wow.
It is a total restart of the case because her attorneys represented her son and then represented her.
Oh.
In the same court case.
Right.
Yeah. This is the custody case.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, someone missed a conflict of interest.
Yeah.
All right. So, one story down.
Yep. Let's go a little lighter.
Okay. Tell me which story that is.
Well, let's go with this daylight savings time from the Washington Post.
All right. So, oh no. Well, you're going to have to take it. I'm not a subscriber.
Oh, no. All right. New daylight savings times. So, see how early or late you would be in the dark. Most U.S. residents, the sun went down earlier on one of the past few days than any other time of the year. Juggling early December sunsets as a result of the annual fall back from daylight savings time to standard time. But what if we had it never spun forward in the first place? Incoming Trump administration government efficiently advisor Elon Musk and Vicky Ranawaya posted earlier in favor of dumping daylight savings time for good. On the flip side, in 2022, the U.S. Senate advanced a plan to make daylight savings time permanent. Either plan would get rid of the twice-a-year change at almost 2/3 of Americans say they want. But the country may be too spread out for a one-size-fits-all, please-all solution. Depending on your latitude and how close you are to the edge of your time zone, you could end up with unexpected daylight extremes. For example, when we moved our clocks back an hour last month, we doomed people in northern Maine to have darkness at 3:45 p.m. on December 10th, the earliest nightfall in the lower 48. If we stayed at standard time year-round, these folks would have June daylight streaming through their windows at 3:39 a.m. Granted, for me, this is a pain in the living ass trying to calibrate time zones and time things. I get that.
Well, but at 3:29 versus 4:29?
Yeah.
So, I mean, how much different is it? Like, you're already
right.
You're already getting hit with it.
Well,
like, that's an obscene early sunrise.
It's an obscene early sunrise, but it would be, if you stuck with the system, it's going to be earlier. That's more like a 5:39 sunrise in June. Instead, it's 3:39 in the morning.
Well, I think it may call into question whether we need to rework some time zones.
Right.
Because in some instances, the time zones carve out and around to grab places that it would not have otherwise grabbed.
Exactly.
And hence the, and there's sometimes that moment when we're watching television in which, I don't know if other people have had it, I have seen some conversations about it before, when it's like you see a television show and like these people are sitting down to breakfast and it's already this bright shining morning, like it looks like it's 9:45. And for those of us in the middle of our time zones that are getting ready for work and school, and it's supposedly like 6:30 in the morning, it's like, who did your lighting? Like, what laundry detergent commercial is this?
Right.
But then when you realize that there are areas in which, oh no, that's what it looks like at 6:30 in the morning.
Right.
This is a very different experience. And it's got to be even worse for people that are on the other edge of a time zone. To be watching those same programs and be like, we barely have daylight at 9:30.
Well, it's like North Dakota. If we went to permanent daylight savings time year round, most of the time North Dakota wouldn't have sunrise until 9:45 a.m. for most of the winter.
I still think in the end, buy your curtains, get your sunlight lamp. It's going to be winter. It just occurs. Like, it's a short day no matter how you do it.
Right.
Does it really matter that at the shortest and longest ends of the year, that are already in extreme, because we get to the middle of summer and I don't care where you are,
right,
you're going to be almost 9 p.m. before it feels like sunset.
Right.
And that's just reality. That's the planet we're on.
Right.
Does it inherently make that much difference what the actual official time is? Other than we have this continuous annual, like twice a year problem of set your clock forward, set your clock back, set your clock forward, set your clock back. And I would also argue
that the problem comes into play is if the U.S. does it alone, that makes everything calculation. Like South Africa doesn't change their time. It has been a nightmare to organize meetings with clients in South Africa.
But is that an end result of the fact that we do change time?
The problem is their plan is not to match any time.
Okay.
So then it's like trying to line up. Like if they go post or pre, it would be complicated.
Okay. I mean, or theoretically, we just split the difference.
Right.
Send the U.S. 30 minutes ahead one last time. And leave it.
Right.
Split the difference. You know what I mean? If you're really trying to do the crosshairs, then just send us 30 minutes forward and be done with it.
Well, I think we should just go to atomic time and be done with it.
Which, I mean, has its benefits and its drawbacks. I do think that would make for a very weird day, and trying to imagine a couple of generations from now, people again, like trying to watch a television show, or which probably won't be a television show at that point, but that's neither here nor there.
Right.
But trying to engage with content that like talks about a bright sunny morning, and they can't understand that.
Right.
Like if you're talking about like UTC and everyone's on it, your bright sunny morning is gonna be in a very weird context.
Right.
Because that's gonna actually probably pose greater problems
Right.
especially for like the US, because you're talking about what, 8 hours of difference between what it would be in like Maine
Mm-hmm.
and what it would be in Hawaii.
No, it's not 8. It's 9.
Yeah, there you go. I knew it was like 8 or 9. I couldn't remember.
Right.
So that creates a very vastly different understanding of what a morning is.
Mm-hmm.
If we're talking about one universal time, I think you have to keep the time zones. I think maybe you have to rethink your time zones a little, and
Mm-hmm.
whether those carve outs, because I think originally Maine for continuity was a timeout
Right.
or a carve out.
Right.
Is I think it's one of the weird,
Mm-hmm.
because if you look at the actual time zone map, there's a lot of weird twists and turns in it as it goes across countries. But again, some of this wouldn't be that far out of line with, like, one, we already have areas of the US that have decided that, like, our time zone's too extreme.
Mm-hmm.
They bumped up 30.
Right.
Then you have areas like Alaska, which, does it matter what time the clock says?
Well, it does
Like,
matter for continuity of running business, and I think these morons don't get those. They think that, you know, California, everybody's on the same time zone. The business says it's open at 9 a.m. 9 a.m. in California comparative to 9 a.m. here, making a universal time of 9 a.m., they're still in the dark most of their business day.
right, and that's what I'm saying is like, that's the main Hawaii difference.
Mm-hmm.
Is Maine's already got like beaming sunlight coming through their windows at 3 something in the morning,
Mm-hmm.
or 4 something in the morning, or whatever in the morning, and 8 hours prior to that
Mm-hmm.
is where Hawaii would be. Like,
Right.
if you put us all in one time zone
Right.
and say, oh, it's all universal,
Right.
we're not a small country. I don't think we can pull that off. Like, if we were
Right.
only as big, if we were only as big as
Mm-hmm.
like the original 13 colonies, yeah, you could probably put us all in one time. Wouldn't matter.
Right.
And fundamentally, I think you would be.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I think you have to maybe skip that idea.
Right.
But I don't think that it's. I don't think that precludes the argument on daylight savings time.
Right.
And splitting the difference at 30 minutes and letting it be. Like, we keep the time zones, we maybe reconfigure some of the carve outs, and whether that line could be straightened out or moved entirely.
Right.
And just go, look, we're going to make your, especially for bumping forward 30 minutes, like the one last 30-minute bump forward.
Right.
And then we perhaps move the lines a little. We may create a more equal time zone.
Right. But see, the problem is, and if we do the time zone things, I'm all for it, but they need to be unifiable. Like, Arizona doesn't get to go, nope, not doing it. No, yes, you're doing it.
Yeah. No, this is an all in, all out. Like, we're not playing games with it. Like, because I specifically know there's part of Indiana that has bumped themselves 30 minutes. I think it's back 30 minutes because they're at the edge of their time zone. And they decided that, we're gonna like do a 30-minute bump out, because it doesn't make sense for us,
right?
And that was a nightmare.
Yeah,
working from like this weirdness of trying to remember when that 30 minutes applies,
right?
Versus if they're already doing it anyway, they would just perpetually stay there, and so would a bunch of other people.
Well, and
at that point, it all makes sense.
Hopefully, what I think they need to go and do is they need to reevaluate, because the Earth has slowed down. When the Earth slows down, and we have pivoted 9 degrees latitude, the time zones don't make sense as they're currently standing for the Earth and when sunrise occurs.
Which, I mean, is a wild thought to have. But it does bring into question, like, how, like, what's our best adjustment here? And it may be none of these. Daylight savings time and the spring forward, spring backward, or fall backward may have no real validity to start with. And then on top of that, we don't need one universal one universal time. But we may also have to look at, like, what's the best approach for this, and perhaps tie it to Earth axis and Earth rotation.
Yes.
And make some micro adjustments. Like, reconsider our groupings. And make some micro adjustments.
Right. Because currently, I think that we are at 24 hours and 37 minutes in a day.
But no, I think most of us are just frustrated with the never-ending problems that come out of time change. And the shift back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And I think there's a bigger, idea that a continuity of time without the back and forth shift, or at least not a 1 hour forward, 1 hour back shift, may do a lot better for most people. It's the time you're like, literally every time change. There are people that end up being late for work, early for work. That a lot of stuff goes wrong that week. Like, most employers have to, like, make allowances for, they in addition to, like, sending out emails at this point, sending out emails, sending out reminders, making sure to try to remind people about time change, because it is such a pain in the butt.
Right.
So if we remove that,
all right, so currently a day is technically, by solar calendar, 24 hours and 0.25, so that would be 15 minutes. Now, if you add that up over the number of years we have quoted 24 hours, we are out of time. And that's what I mean by solar calendar and solar houring.
Well, and that may be the actual reality that we have to take, is we have to consider that extra 15 minutes. Right. Because if we keep jumping and following a fully 24-hour clock, that's probably not going to work.
No. All right, so here's a serious AI one. This is our tech news, but I do want to give a trigger warning. We will be talking about self-harm. We will be talking about parricide. Jump in, baby.
All right, so chatbots urge teen to self-harm, suggested murdering parents, lawsuit says. So Ars Technica brings us the story. Parents suing want Character.ai to delete its models trained on kids' data. After a troubling October lawsuit accused Character.ai, C.ai, of recklessly releasing dangerous chatbots that allegedly caused a 14-year-old boy's suicide, More families have come forward to sue chatbot maker Character Technologies and the startup's major funder, Google. On Tuesday, another lawsuit was filed in a U.S. district court in Texas, this time by families struggling to help their kids recover from traumatizing experiences where C.AI chatbots allegedly groomed kids and encouraged repeated self-harm and other real-world violence. In the case of one 17-year-old boy with high-functioning autism, JF, the chatbot's JF is how we're referring to the child. The chatbot seemed so bent on isolating him from his family after his screen time was reduced that the bot suggested that murdering his parents was a reasonable response to their imposing time limits on his online activity, the lawsuit said. Because the teen had already become violent, his family still lives in fear of his erratic outbursts even a full year after being cut off from the app. So families are seeking injunctive relief. C.AI was founded by ex-Googlers and allows anyone to create a chatbot with any personality they like, including emulating famous fictional characters and celebrities, which seem to attract kids to the app. But families suing allege that while so-called developers created the chatbots, C.AI controls the outputs and doesn't filter out harmful content. The product initially launched to users 12 years old and up, but recently changed to a 17-plus rating shortly after the teen boy's suicide. That and other recent changes that C.AI has made to improve minor safety since haven't gone far enough to protect vulnerable kids like JF, the new lawsuit alleged. Matali Jain, director of the Tech Justice Law Project and an attorney representing all families suing, told ours that the goal of the lawsuit is to expose allegedly systemic issues with C.AI's design and prevent the seemingly harmful data it has been trained on from influencing other AI systems, like possibly Google's Gemini. The potential for that already seems to be in motion, the lawsuit alleges, since Google licensed C.AI technology and rehired its founders earlier this year. Like the prior lawsuit, the new complaint alleges that ex-Googlers who started Character Technologies only left the giant company to train a model that Google considered too dangerous to put out under its own name. The plan all along, the lawsuits allege, was to extract sensitive data from minors and evolve the model so that Google could reacquire it and use it to power Gemini. That's why Character Technologies isn't seemingly bothered to be operating largely at a loss, the lawsuit alleges. Google's spokesperson, Jose Castaneda, told ours that Google denies playing any role in C.AI's development apart from funding. Google and Character.ai are completely separate, unrelated companies, and Google has never had a role in designing or managing their AI model or technologies, nor have we used them in our products, Castaneda said. User safety is a top concern for us, which is why we've taken a cautious and responsible approach to developing and rolling out our AI products with rigorous testing and safety processes. C.AI spokesperson told ours that C.AI does not comment on pending litigation. There are easy ways that C.AI could make its chatbot safer to interact with kids, the latest lawsuit said. Some requested remedies might force C.AI to post more prominent disclaimers that remind users that chatbots are not real people, and to program chatbots to stop contradicting disclaimers by insisting they are human. Families also want C.AI to add technical interventions to detect problematic outputs and block minor users from accessing adult content. Perhaps most critically, they want C.AI to warn kids if self-harm is discussed and provide links to resources to seek help. But that's not all the families think needs to change with C.AI. They think the current allegedly defective model should be destroyed to remedy the alleged harms and end C.AI's alleged unjust enrichment. The families have asked the court to order C.AI to delete its models trained on kids' data. Their request of injunctive relief would essentially shut down C.AI for all users, since C.AI allegedly failed to implement reliable age verification processes to determine which users are minors. Currently, C.AI is available only to users age 17 and up, but it historically has relied on users self-reporting age, which the complaint said wasn't effective age gating. A loss could lead to heavy fines for character technology and possibly Google, as the families have asked for punitive damages. They also seek money to cover their families' past and future medical expenses, mental pain and suffering, impairment to perform everyday activities, and loss of enjoyment of life. So yeah.
Yeah. This is kind of important, and this is why. And I don't remember who it was Microsoft that done an OpenAI, who turned into a little racist bitch and about destroyed a lot of people.
That was like one afternoon that it went nuts.
Right.
Like it exposed it to the internet, and the internet destroyed it. Was the argument that Microsoft held in that one. And so but I think it needs some highlighting. What they're saying C.AI is basically Google spun out a company and went, look, we need to train models on children, but we don't expect this to go well.
Right.
Because you're gonna be working through an area that we've had to put a lot of baby gates up for,
right,
to avoid any criminal liability as Google. So here's a bunch of money, y'all former Google employees, y'all go over here and start a company,
right,
and don't baby gate it.
Right.
And create it in a way that it encourages children to join.
Right.
And maybe lie about how old they are to do so.
Right.
And whatever happens, happens.
Right.
You'll get potentially sued into oblivion.
Right.
And that's okay. You'll have a job waiting at Google when the company goes boom.
Right.
All in the hopes of already having the models.
Right.
Before they get sued into oblivion and shut down. I think what this case is doing is it's challenging the idea that Google gets to like harm a bunch of kids through a spin out company.
Right.
That was never intended to succeed at anything other than getting the data.
Right.
That they can get that data and just, pay out a bunch of people and go, oh, well, sorry that happened.
Right.
And unbeknownst to anyone, all that data gets reabsorbed into Google and is used.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we're not even going to show the screenshots in this story.
Oh, yeah, no. It says, I haven't even seen the screenshots, but I'm sure they are horrific. Horrific. Because, again, you're interacting with children.
Right.
And trust me, I'm not typically someone who's like, but the children. But there are instances in which you do have to, from a technology standpoint,
right,
recognize you're interacting with children.
Right.
That's why Google would never interact with children like this directly. Right. It's because you're going to get sued into oblivion because you're messing with not completely fully formed minds with a not completely fully formed technology.
Yeah,
it's not going to go well.
Well, not only that, but I'm sorry, I still think that 18 needs to be the age for any of this.
But therein lies the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the biggest users and enjoyers of the hims and the hers, the Alexas and the Google Assistants and Siris,
Right.
some of the biggest users
Right.
are kids.
Right.
Like, hi, those are like the biggest adopters of technology are typically children.
Right.
Like, we went from setting our parents' clocks on our VCRs, on their VCRs, to another generation that
Mm-hmm.
took like a duck to water in telling a device to turn on lights and turn off lights and tell me a joke and read me a story and help me with my homework and
Right. Right.
Because there is a plasticity in younger minds to adopt to a technology.
Right.
So there was already the child interaction with other AI models.
Mm-hmm.
But again, those are baby gated systems that
Mm-hmm.
like there's a whole laundry list of things that like no, don't do that.
Right.
Like, there's certain things you ask the hims or hers about, you immediately get warnings.
Right.
Alarm bells go off everywhere. This seems like an attempt to do an unfettered conversation with people, specifically children,
Right.
and see where it goes. While I can, on a level,
Right.
appreciate the perhaps desire for that data, that's not something you turn loose in the wild with no one around to safeguard.
Exactly.
I mean, it's one thing if you were to create this model and recruit parents to allow their children to interact with it
Mm-hmm.
in a very heavily monitored way, so that you can train an AI model, but also add a buffer that like no one's going to get hurt.
Right.
And that we can pull this child out for appropriate counseling. We can pull this child out to prevent self-harm. We can start pumping brakes if this conversation goes off the rails.
Right. And it should be conversation that's avoiding, like, or not allowing it.
But therein lies sometimes the problem, is when we prevent conversations
Mm-hmm.
and blanket warning and create the baby gates.
Right.
Sometimes you end up like, this is the only outcry a child will have.
Right.
Before they take an action, regardless of what else is done.
Mm-hmm.
Because we see that even in human interaction.
Right.
The number of people that unalive themselves, that have interactions that you look back on, especially if you've had people in your life do the unaliving, that you look back on and it starts to feel like they were trying to tell you, and you just didn't hear it, or they told you flat out, and you like, you're not going to do that.
Right.
And they shut up. So, though I would hope that wasn't the legitimate intent of C.AI, was to see how far a self-harm conversation could go.
Right. But that should be alarming.
Right. It should be throwing alarm bells all over the system that, like,
right.
The score on this conversation indicates
Right.
a high potentiality of self-harm or harm to others.
Right.
Like, adults need to be informed.
Right.
Like, get your child help. Get this person help.
Right.
Even if the data is wrong,
Right.
It's better to intervene than to just wait and see what happens, or to
Right.
take we don't have that responsibility,
Mm-hmm.
which is utterly the point that I have a problem with. Is that like C.AI was spun out so that no one had responsibility.
Right.
Like that seems like the intent from the start is we're not going to have responsibility for this.
Right.
Google's not going to have responsibility for this.
Right.
It is an absolute nightmare of a way to run a system. And it almost seems like the reverse engineered version of what was that software that got in so much trouble? Like, I don't know, it was over a decade ago now. It was Penguin Chat or Penguin Club or something.
Penguin Club.
Yeah. That like it was a total kids site. Designed for kids, meant for kids. Like it was total kids activity portal. Like it was not an adult place.
Right.
And never should it ever have been. But because it was such a beacon for children, and it had so many features than other places that children went, right. It became a massive walk into the light for children that nefarious adults started joining by pretending to be children in order to groom and abuse children.
Right.
And it was like, one, it was never supposed to happen. No one thought it would happen. Like, why would adults show up here? There's no adult content. This is all baby content. The only adults that are going to join are going to be the parents setting up accounts for their kids so they can play on the,
right.
Play the games, play the, like, color the books, whatever,
Do the tic-tac-toe. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, I don't know how else to explain it, but it was like no one ever stopped and thought that, like, to some extent, it's like, well, if you don't have any connection to kids, why are you at a KB Toys?
Right.
Why are you at a Toys R Us? If you don't have children, you don't know people with children, you're not buying anything for a child, why the hell would you be in the toy store?
Right.
Now, granted, toys extend beyond, children. Anyway, but no one ever stopped and thought, like, should we maybe be concerned about this 32-year-old?
Right.
Oh, because we don't know, because of self-reported ages, that the 32-year-old is 32.
Right.
Or more to the point, we just assumed it was a parent who was getting stuff for a kid. Daycare kid or whatever. Only for the system to really have never thought out safeguarding. This is kind of like, this is the inverse of that, is when you take that whole problem that occurred for Penguin World and you work it backwards and go, what can we do if we turn the AI model loose?
Right.
Sure, some people might, say some inappropriate things, or some kids might see some adult content, or, whatever. It's, whatever. And whether this was, we didn't expect it to go this far, or we didn't, or if legitimately, and this is going to end up being the lawsuit question, did you know that it could go this far? Did you expect it to go this far? And what the hell were you doing to keep it from going this far?
Right. And at what point do you delete these characters that are just pure fucking nasty?
Fair enough. But then it becomes an issue of, but what do you do with the data?
Right.
Like, I mean, you may make a character unavailable, you may make it a model unavailable, Because, okay, that's not safe for, legitimately not safe for children. Not safe for work, not safe for life. But that also, like, you wouldn't want to use the model. But then there comes the question of what use and what value would the model have in an effort to prevent other models from going rogue and ending up like this model. What can we extrapolate from it to create the appropriate baby gating that can walk a better line of understanding the actual harms that are about to occur? Like what pattern recognition can we get so that if a child or anyone, quite frankly, makes an off-color comment, hey, I'm really thinking about killing my parents today, that model can understand the difference between the child is about to commit a felony and the child is having a moment. Because that seems to be like the put it together problem that AI seems to be having is telling the difference between, this is a child in trouble or a person in trouble, however you want to put it, a person in trouble that is headed down a very dark pathway. And this is a person with a very dark sense of humor that says wild things, which is a very human ability to differentiate at times. And sometimes humans can't.
Well, and sometimes
we don't always get it right. Well, and machines especially can't. But even humans have problems sometimes telling the difference without being a trained professional. And even trained professionals sometimes get it wrong. They tend to err on the side of caution instead of going, it's probably a joke.
I don't know. We're going to have to watch this case. I think it's very sad. I think parents need to be involved in what their children are doing and aware of what their companion, if they have a companion, is saying to them. And then, like, really looking at the safeguards for individuals with special situations. Like, when I was a kid, I could watch horror movies. However, I wouldn't let my niece watch them because she can't handle them.
Well, yeah, that's a very real issue that, like, in families occurs. You're not... You have to judge by the kid. And I think to some extent, part of the problem that we ultimately have had, and perhaps the goal of current, like whether it's C.AI or others that will come after, is trying to learn how to make the judgment. And unfortunately, you can't just do that off of baby gates. That's not learning to make a judgment. That's being told there's a hard guardrail right here. Do not go past go. If this occurs, do that. That's a baby gate. You don't get choices. You're locked out. Versus actually making the distinguished decision between what could, out of context, sound horrible, that isn't, and what, regardless of context, is horrible and should be taken seriously.
All right. So you found a story right before going to air. Let's dig into it.
Oh, so teacher resigns after video shows him throwing 11-year-old student across classroom. Savannah, Georgia, a mom in Georgia said a teacher threw her 11-year-old son across a classroom, and it was caught on video. The incident happened at Dereni Middle School in Savannah on Friday. Video shows Betraylan Elder a teacher and football coach grabbing a student identified as TJ by the shirt and throwing him across the room onto desks, knocking him down. Chanel Russell, TJ's mother, said she wants accountability from the school district. Quote, I was told that he had a share of words that were inappropriate to TJ and that he had made some remarks about me, and my son was unhappy with it. So my son then went to the front of the classroom to approach the teacher, letting him know, hey, stop talking about my mom. The teacher then came closer to my son. My son again said, stop talking about my mom, and also wanted to call me. From that point, he was then grabbed and thrown to the floor like nothing, Russell said. The comments, according to another student, were sexual in nature, with the teacher allegedly saying that, quote, he left his shoes at TJ's mom's house. Russell said she has never even met this teacher before and is appalled the teacher would say anything like this to her son. I just feel like they failed me. They let me down. It is heartbreaking. It causes a lack of trust in the school system. Something needs to be done, Russell said. Russell said her son was injured in the altercation, saying he has a concussion, multiple bruises, and is now scared to go back to school. He needs to be placed in jail. He hurt my boy. I'm heartbroken because I wouldn't do that to my child. His father wouldn't do that to him. So for the teacher to take the initiative to do that is sickening, Russell said. Russell said she doesn't want this to change the way her son thinks of teachers or school as a whole, but she is worried about the emotional toll this will have long term. She said the school district needs to have more thorough training and a better vetting process. Quote, I hate that my son had to be made an example out of to get a sick individual out of a schoolhouse, but something needs to change, Russell said. The district said the teacher was initially relocated, but has since resigned. The Savannah-Chatham County Public School System said in a statement, on December 6, 2024, an incident involving a teacher and student at Durrani Middle School was reported to district personnel. Following the report, thorough statements were collected, and the teacher was immediately reassigned to an alternate location to ensure they had no interaction with students. Over the weekend, the teacher submitted their resignation, which was received and accepted by SCCPSS Human Resources. Please be assured that this was an isolated incident, and we take matters like this extremely seriously. The safety and well-being of our student population are of the utmost importance to us, and we are committed to maintaining a safe and supportive environment for all.
That is despicable. One, for him to just be reassigned, like, oh, go down the hall. No.
Well, I'm thinking maybe they did a reassignment to somewhere where he could ride a desk. Like you have no interaction with children.
Right.
Is what they're making it sound like.
Well,
is like they may have put him at a board office. They may have put him at a closed school. Like there's no telling.
Right.
Put him in the maintenance office, something. Just get him away from students. He does not teach. Right. He has no interaction.
Well, and he should have no interaction. He's just dangerous. In general, I hope that they press battery charges on this person because he should not be dealing with children in any fashion.
I mean, the escalation on that.
Right.
Like, what the hell?
Right.
Like, that's very intense escalation for an 11-year-old whose mother you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I get middle schoolers can sometimes, like, fall into the don't start none, wouldn't have been none. They said some things that were inappropriate. But and so I can kind of understand maybe a teacher said something inappropriate back to try to shut someone up.
Mm-hmm.
But that one doesn't sound like how this started.
Right.
Or if it was, it's part of a larger series of events.
Events.
Because it doesn't sound like that was the immediate
Right.
proceeding. Like,
Right. Like both of these stories seem like they're censored, and that may be from law enforcement. But this should not have happened on any level of the imagination.
No. I'm not defending the teachers or trying to call out the student as a problem. I'm saying I do understand that sometimes teachers say inappropriate things back to students who, in this age range, do have a habit of being especially rude, crass, insensitive, inappropriate anyway. But typically, that doesn't involve picking one up, throwing them across a room. Like that's not where this goes.
No, it isn't.
Again, I kind of remember a couple of teachers saying some really inappropriate things to students from when I was in middle school.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, as in, this student has been trying to play class clown, has been saying things and making statements and making jokes, and everyone's been laughing. And I've seen a teacher kind of go, all right, let me show you what being 40 years older than you can do.
Right.
As I cut you down.
Right. But at the same time,
shut up.
At the same time, you're not going after the mother. You're correcting the behavior, and you ain't throwing a student across the house.
Or across the room. No.
Right.
No. Like, it stopped well before that. But there were moments, and yes, I've heard teachers make a comment about a student's mother before. And it's like, if you hadn't started on this teacher, and that was supposed to be the whole lesson, is don't start none, won't be none.
Right.
Like, you want to sit here and talk smack, professionally, I'm not supposed to do this, but there's a limit that we all have.
Right.
And so I will show you what being significantly older than you will do to your ability to talk smack.
Right.
So then you're going to hear that and not appreciate it at all, and maybe learn to shut up.
Right.
Which typically works. Very rarely did I see that one fail. I saw some people have a light bulb moment that this whole talking smack thing that like middle schoolers like doing was a two-way street. The more you talk it, the more you're going to hear back. And when someone is better than you at it, you're not going to like it.
Right. But no, I don't hold up to either of these. I think that this is very unprofessional, and very dangerous. And thank goodness we had cameras in there, because it's no longer he said, she said.
Very much so. And this looks like it was probably a student with a phone. Like, another student knew this was about to go bad. Real quick.
It's getting more and more prevalent.
Which on some level it does help, especially with like this incident, though we do not have like what happened before this.
Right.
So it's kind of the moment where like a teacher with a body cam, a teacher with a camera in the classroom would probably have better evidentiary usage for like at least understanding like what has been going on that got us here. Like, it's clearly an outsized reaction.
Right.
No one's arguing that. And it's not about trying to defend the teacher necessarily as much as it is to understand, like, was this literally apropos of nothing that this teacher decided, I left my shoes at your mom's house last night for no reason. Like, why you bringing this kid in? He didn't do nothing.
Right.
Like, he didn't start any. So why did you?
Right.
Or was there other things going on and it's still an outsized horrible reaction?
Right.
But now we know where in diffusing that we need to target that better, like the mother's asking for, the better training and education for our educators for dealing with these kinds of classroom situations. But without that, what was it?
Right.
Some students will say one thing, some students will say another. The teacher's going to say something or nothing.
Right.
And the student that got thrown is really only going to remember the thing that the teacher said before throwing him across a room and may not connect it to anything he's done.
Right.
So, one, this kid's not going to get any help understanding that, like, we're not saying this is your fault, but this contributed.
Right.
Like, you need to really quickly make a connection. The things that you said or did have a provoking nature. It should never have gotten to this point, which is a lot of nuance. Should have never gotten to where it went, but there was a little bit of you started it. Again, this is a fully grown adult who needed to be more in control of their own actions.
Right.
And none of this should have occurred. But in the rest of the world, when you get out into it, this is very much how this could go down. You could say something that seemingly is very benign, that ultimately becomes very massively life-changing.
Right.
So, yeah. Or none of that occurred, and this is a teacher with a problem, and nothing this kid did warranted anything that happened at all in any way, that at no point should the teacher have even made the comment that started all of it.
Right.
And that's kind of an important distinction, to be able to look at a kid and say, you were completely innocent. We don't know why this happened. This is an adult with serious problems.
Right.
But without that pre-information, how do you
You don't know.
Yeah.
All right. So let's hear you. Are you an asshole?
All righty. This is a long one, and I kind of already think I know where the vote's going, but here we go.
Okay.
Am I the asshole for telling my cousin that it's not my fault she bought her degree? I am 18 years old, non-binary, closeted, and I live with my parents. My father, who is 68, and my mother, who is 60. We are closer to my father's family because they live closer to us than any of my mother's relatives. My father has a brother, 72 male, married to my aunt, 70 female. They have a daughter, my cousin, 40. I can't stand my cousin because she thinks she is better than everyone else and has a degree in psychology. One day, we were at my aunt's house for my niece's birthday. 6 female, my stepbrother's daughter, 48 male. At some point, my cousin and I started talking, and she said that she can't stand that all these people are diagnosed with dyslexia because, in her opinion, it's just an excuse for stupid people who don't try hard enough, and that she knows this because she has a degree in psychology. I looked at her and told her that I am severely dyslexic, dysgraphic, and dyscalculic, and that I have a really hard time reading and writing. She laughed and told me that I was just stupid. I decided to ignore her comments and went to entertain my niece. When it was time for my presents, my cousin gave my niece a book and told her to ask me to read it out loud. Of course, my niece did. I panicked because I have a hard time reading, let alone reading out loud. Luckily, my mother noticed and told my niece that she would read it to her because she loves to read. After my niece moved in with my mother, I confronted my cousin and asked, "What's your problem?" She told me that I just needed to practice and stop pretending. At that point, I got angry and told her that it wasn't my fault that she had bought her degree in and therefore didn't really know what dyslexia was. After this exchange, both she and I went out so as to not ruin the party, but she started insulting me for all my choices, from my appearance to my tattoos, and even said that I wasn't feminine enough. I remained calm since I'm used to her insults by now and went back inside to play Lego with my niece. However, today I received a text from my aunt accusing me of being a bitch for insinuating that my cousin's degree was fake. Even though my parents told me I did the right thing, now I'm not sure if I did it right. So, am I the asshole?
No.
Huh.
Not even close to it, baby doll.
Even if you wanted to formulate that opinion about dyslexia, dyscalculia, dysgraphia, I would think your degree would have challenged that notion. I really do. Not affirmed it.
It should have challenged it. Now, granted, if she bought it from a Cracker Jack box off the back of a Sears catalog,
yeah.
You know, if she actually took time and studied and saw the brain mental processes that occur with both dyslexia, dyscalculia, and dysgraphia, then she would know that it actually is a wiring situation.
Well, and I think what's missing from this and what it seems like has happened is she got the degree, but she never used it. Like, I get a strong opinion here, or a strong insinuation here, that she got the degree, wherever it came from. It could be from an Ivy League college. It doesn't really matter.
Right.
But she never actually went into practice.
Right.
Like, she doesn't see patients. She doesn't work with people.
Right.
Or whatever she's doing, it's not patient
related.
Like, it doesn't interact with patients. Right. Maybe she's in research. Maybe she's doing something.
Maybe she's a stay-at-home mom that plays patty cake.
And writes books.
Right.
Supporting whatever.
Right.
Like this opinion that she has. I just want
to say the number of damn times I've been told this. You just need to read more. You need to work harder. You need to focus more. Don't get me started.
I like there's the ridiculousness of it, but I would even sit here and say, you know, it's an opinion. Everyone's entitled to have their own. Most people know better than to like say crap like this out loud. Like, if that's your personal opinion, you could think it to yourself. I'm just struggling with why you felt like you had to bring it up and say it.
Well,
like, what were you doing with that other than antagonizing? Which sounds like you're using your degree quite well, just for nefarious purposes of alienating those around you.
Well, not only that, but making misdiagnosis, missituational choices. Like, if she's on a psychology board, which may be why she's not in practice, and she's not passed her boards, I would make a formal complaint on that board.
Because what I think the reality is I think it goes deeper and it's a lot darker than it appears on the surface.
Right.
I think she's legitimately, perhaps in practice, and I don't think she actually has the opinion.
Right.
I think she's really that there's a mutual hatred between cousins, and she's using everything she's been taught with her psychology degree to completely undermine and destroy her cousin.
Right.
OP, as in the cousin to OP, is using everything in her psychology degree
Right.
to destroy OP.
Right. But the number of times that I have personally heard this from psychologists in the school system is ridiculous.
Granted, I'll say that's been quite a while ago.
Yes.
And it was a common opinion that dyslexia didn't exist and dysgraphia didn't exist and dyscalculia didn't exist. And I understand that. And there was a large shift and fight regarding it. But ultimately, we've moved so far past that.
Right.
That, like, for someone to legitimately have that opinion now and at 40, for Christ's sake, is just nuts.
Yeah.
I mean, if they were 80 or 90 or even in their 70s,
right.
I could see it. Like that's a product of an older generation.
Right.
That you got your degree and everything back when this was all still kind of, a joke. Right. And now, like, no, we got a lot of research that says no. Right. So to still be sitting here trying to claim that, I don't think it's legit. I don't. I think that she professionally knows better. But I think she also is utilizing this to hurt OP as much as possible. Right. And I'm like, why?
Because it's the ultimate revenge, because she has a degree, so she knows. It's like the battles that I've had over food, over interaction of food, over pronouns and names, like all this crap comes from people that do not listen. Okay, that at one time, had a total, the cutting edge information, and it's no longer cutting edge. It's not even on Tuesday cutting edge. It's not even woo-woo cutting edge, which can either be 20 years in the future or 20 years in the past. This is ridiculous. All right. So the poll is up. You can vote whether yes, she's an asshole for the way she handled the situation by telling the cousin to flank off, or no, she done just fine.
Oh, yeah. Oh, Shannon. Ow. So Shannon sneezed and hurt my back. Ooh. Ooh, I know that one. That hurts. That hurts. All right. So moving along, so our psychic blood types, please forgive me if it's been asked time and time again. I'm wondering if there's truth to the assertion that those of us with a negative RH factor have psychic abilities. A negative with an even rarer note attached to my blood type that I can't access in my files at the moment. It's some sort of acronym that I found out when I was in labor back in June and preparing for the possibility of a potential blood transfusion. A psychic also informed me that I have some sort of psychic ability as well.
One is not connected to the other within our research, meaning this has been one of those theories. It isn't connective, meaning that we have not proven it or even in theorizing. While psychic abilities have been proven to be DNA-based, and that's within your blood, so yes, you may have that, but the RH, a positive, negative, or A factor, or AB, or C, or O factor, are not in evident at this time.
Yeah, or even some of the odder. There are some very, very rare, like RH factor issues,
right?
That are super rare. But yeah, no, I don't think I've seen anything that really clarified that, other than to say I don't think it exists.
Right.
Like, you can't blood type someone and go, you're a psychic because we blood typed you and it's this.
Right. I think you have to go deeper. You have to go into the DNA structure. You have to look at the DNA and see where the alignments are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's even if you want to say that it's totally genetic.
Right. Also looking at the frontal cortex, that's a lot of research coming out right now, is more activity in the frontal cortex of the brain.
And even still, that's going to come down to you have a greater propensity, or you may have an easier time of it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the general consensus is it doesn't, it still wouldn't like keep you from developing.
Right.
Like if you made the effort, you took the time, you might, one, it may not be easy.
Right.
It's not going to be someone who has an uncontrolled live tap stream that like the more typical presentation that people talk about.
Right.
But it doesn't mean that you're never going to have a psychic experience, that you're incapable of having a psychic experience, and that you're totally incapable of working, for instance, as a psychic. It's just you're coming from behind a boulder.
Right.
Like some people are like, "Hi, I'm here."
Well, some people are stiffs. Like there is no psychic bone in their body. They cannot even find themselves away to the Congo. Okay, even if you point them there.
But it doesn't mean they were totally incapable.
No, I mean, I've met stiffs.
That really truly are just you couldn't.
Yeah,
there's no chance you were going to have a metaphysical experience.
Exactly.
Like you can't connect with it. You can't understand it. You can't do it. You can't.
You just don't have it.
Okay. I would have said that it was more like you're going to have to work for it.
Well, I've told them they have to work for it, honey, but they are so sweet and so lovely and so woo-woo. But at the same time, it's like, honey, it's not that you don't have the psychic muscle. That muscle is so out of shape and bent and covered in, psycho fat, it isn't going to happen.
Like, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. All right, so let's check the poll. Ooh.
Survey says.
Nope, you're not the asshole again. Dang it. We gotta find better ones to get you convicted.
Hey. If this one had been from the other side, I would have totally taken the asshole mantle of honor. Because God, that was horrible. But I specifically chose that one because it does cover a topic. Right. And the reality sometimes that people have to face is that it's not even that they have the opinion. It's that they know the trauma that comes with being dyslexic, being dysgraphic, being dyscalculate.
Right.
That a lot of people internally, their first handle on this is, I'm stupid. Everyone around me gets this shit. Everyone else is reading perfectly fine. Everyone else can do math. Everyone else. And it's usually the like your interaction with the world and how you first see yourself in it. In like a classroom setting is I'm stupid. Everyone else has it. Everyone else gets it. Everyone else doesn't have a problem with this. I'm the problem. So as part of the whole process of that, which I don't think we pay enough attention to, is we end up providing a lot of support and aid and training and lessons for overcoming and working around and dealing with, but I don't necessarily think that we interact enough with people who are dyslexic, dyscalculate, dysgraphic, to fix that broken 5-year-old, who was never broken. It's just you have a learning disability.
Right.
Like, and we work around that, and that's fine. You're not stupid. I don't think we do enough to fix that wounded inner child.
Right.
And then you end up in adulthood, 40 some years old, being easily attacked by people who know this about you.
Mm-hmm.
Because they know that, or more importantly, perhaps sometimes they don't know, the harm that the words they're saying specifically have.
Right.
That, you could look at anyone else in your friend group, anyone else in your family, and you could be like, God, you're stupid for anything they say or do, and they'll laugh it off and be like, yeah, that was stupid.
Right.
But in this instance, this looks to me like someone who is specifically using their knowledge of the fact that it's a very common thing for there to be a wounded, broken inner child, whose first interaction with numbers and words and letters and all of this was feeling broken and stupid.
Right.
And is literally using that to critical hit points.
Well, yeah,
all over the place.
The other side of that, and this is the side that recently dyslexic are into spelling and grammar errors faster than anyone else. Like proofreading, we may not be able to outwardly verbal read, but we can tell you that word's wrong.
Yeah, like and there's some back and forth on that,
right?
Because there's some words like you've talked about in the past that you have problems with some less common words.
Right. They don't fit the puzzle.
Right, because you get used to more visually interacting with words.
Right.
And the shape that they have. And so if you have a similar word that totally different meaning, totally different purpose, it can trip you up.
Right.
Because to get through daily life, you're looking for shapes and patterns.
Right. And
over
context.
and over. Yeah. And so when you see that shape, you say that word.
Right.
And if it's just a little off, which can also happen with like weird fonts, weird like graphics around fonts, like there's a lot of things that can occur there.
The Chinese restaurant, I could never order off that menu.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that font kills you. Papyrus is the worst font that was ever invented to start with. Using it on a menu at a very small point size is a horrible idea.
Right.
Now dysgraphia, I've only actually run into one person that has dysgraphia. And that was wild to me.
Okay.
Icons and symbols have zero meaning for them. None.
Right.
None. A snowflake doesn't mean cold. It doesn't mean anything. It does not connect. I'm looking at a weird pattern shape and trying to figure out what the fuck does that mean.
Right.
Was literally how I got it explained to me. And I'm like, and like color doesn't do it either.
Right.
Like, and all this was in context of, I was in the car with her, and it is North Carolina in July, and this woman has her heat going full blast. And I look over at her and I'm like, are you trying to kill us? Like, this car was 120 degrees when we got in it and you've got the heat on? I'm like, are you trying to kill us? And she's like, oh God, I'm so sorry. And she said, just put it wherever it needs to be. She said, I've been wondering why I've been so hot. And I'm having this whole moment because I'm like, this is a very intelligent woman. She works with numbers all day long. She sees patterns in numbers I could never have found. Like, she is not unintelligent in any way. But when someone says they're looking at their temperature controls on their car, and it's like, I don't know what any of this means. It's like, what?
Like how does that work?
What? What? Like, I didn't just hear what I thought I heard. There's no way. Like, am I having a stroke right now? How do you?
Right.
To only then find out, like, I'm dysgraphic. Symbols and colors and this shit doesn't do anything for me.
Right.
I need it to tell me a fan speed.
Right.
I need it to tell me hot or cold. I need to see the words. Like little snowflakes and little heat waves don't tell me anything.
Right.
I need actual numbers and letters and whatever, because this, I don't know what I'm doing.
Right.
I just wait till I get miserable and smack it.
Right. One way or another.
Yeah. And hope that it works out for me.
Right.
Like all the little like indicators for which vents are doing what, she needed words.
Right.
Windshield, front vent, floor.
Right.
Like things that we erased from cars that they used to have.
Right.
And replaced them with little symbols and shapes and, funny, funky things. She was the same way and had problems and actually had stories about the problems she had with dash lights. Again, doesn't mean anything.
Right.
Tell me my battery's not charging. Just tell me that.
Right.
Tell me I have an airbag problem.
Right.
Like, that's the data she needed. She couldn't work with images.
Right.
They did nothing.
Exactly.
It was fascinating to me. Like, we had an amazing conversation about it. Because I'm just sitting here like, I can't imagine the struggle of trying to go through a world in which all these common symbols and things that we've done to create a world in which you don't need to be on the same language because we can share the same like iconography to mean things like, place hands, receive bacon.
Right.
The universal symbol for hand dryer. She has no clue what the fuck that means.
Right.
Like what? Like it doesn't connect with anything for her. And so she's walking around just having to like go through this and figure out what things are.
Right.
Unless it has a tag that says, and granted, in most situations, once you know what a hand dryer is, you know what a hand dryer is, you don't need the label anymore. But if you get into a situation where you're in, and we've seen those get added to the world, these really odd new designs of like the little infrared blow dryer thing. That kind of looks like a weird urinal or whatever attached to a sink. That's gonna mess with her if all she has to go on is some weird, hand and bacon symbol, because that doesn't tell her anything, and she can't memorize them because she can't store them because they don't have any meaning.
Right, and that is a default problem. Because I store the combinations of the letters.
Yeah. Like your visual brain can still work within the fact that the letters don't independently form meaning for you.
Right.
You can just learn this is the shape of it and this is the word this.
Right.
And okay, we go on and we learn and we just keep, and maybe over time you start breaking down, well, the shape of these two letters is the, and the shape of these two letters is is.
Right.
So those two together are this.
Right. Or, or the combination of HTE before something or ETH or EHTV. It gets like I can play Scrabble really well.
Mm-hmm. Like, and you do. But the whole thing being to go from the other direction,
Mm-hmm.
in which mentally you're operating like a DOS prompt.
Mm-hmm.
Like it like literally, and it so many things made sense to me after that.
Mm-hmm.
Like the struggles that she had and had to have people like come in and go find the icon on my desktop that does this.
Right.
The worst thing you could do to this woman is she had to memorize or read
Mm-hmm.
what each of those icons were to find something. Because
Right.
the icon's not going to do it for her.
Right.
The you know what I mean? Like, so she was connecting to this rough approximation
Mm-hmm.
of where my mouse needs to be
Mm-hmm.
to click to do a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like hit the start menu or, you know, but once you got her into an all textual environment,
Mm-hmm.
she's golden.
I'm quite sure she's learned keyboard shortcuts.
Oh yeah, tons of them. She
Yep.
keyboard warrior from hell.
Mm-hmm.
And again, didn't really make sense to me watching her do stuff sometimes. Because
Mm-hmm.
on one hand, if you're trying to visually watch her do something, you better be looking at her hands.
Right.
To figure out, like, you got to get the whole contextual idea. Otherwise, things just pop and, you know,
Right.
occur.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, how did you do that? What are you doing?
Right.
Only to realize later that, no, she's dysgraphic. Like, she has to work entirely.
Right.
Like, she would be so much better off with old school DOS.
Right.
Give me a chewy interface. Give me all the characters.
Right.
Like,
yeah. And she's obviously an Apple user.
No.
Really? Interesting.
No, she was on Windows, not by any joy or love, but just because that's what's in the workplace. But no, she like literally going through apps with like a menu bar of icons.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you better turn on text labels.
Right.
Oh, she is so lost. And she has to sit and read them. She has to read till she finds the word.
Right.
Like, it was wild. We had so many conversations after that because I was just, oh my God, what did we do to the world for people like you? Like, oh my God, this is horrible. Right. Like, I can't, like, I didn't know that was a thing that happened. Like, we talk a lot about dyslexia. Dyscalculia was kind of a newer one for me because it's like, wait, well, you have dyslexia, but with numbers. Okay. Didn't know that was possible. And then, you know, dysgraphia? What is dysgraphia? What do you mean? Like, totally enamored.
Right. Well, you know, and that's something else, you know, that's interesting. And I kind of made a comment this week earlier with somebody. There was a spelling error. It was actually a language error. It wasn't exactly a spelling error. It was a language error. And I caught it faster than everyone else because I looked at it and I said, that's not a word. That's not an English word.
Well, yeah, the more important part is that's not an English word.
Right.
I know what that word is.
Mm-hmm.
That's not English.
Right. Again, because I can sight read certain languages because I know the combination of them. Mm-hmm. And I found this is one of those points in the world when it's like, you don't know that word? Like, we've worked in this market for 9 years now, and you don't know that word? How do you not know that word?
Yeah.
How do you not know that word, which is love or dear or term of endearment?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
You'd think you would. But no, well, because like I've had this happen, working on computers that are set to a different language.
Mm-hmm.
Now, sometimes that's intentional because this is someone with a different native language.
Right.
And so their computer is set to say German.
Mm-hmm.
Other instances that I've run this into is sometimes when your toddler is smacking on your keyboard,
mm-hmm.
they will inadvertently swap languages.
Just for the hell of it.
Not intentionally. They didn't, like, crap happens. Sometimes cat steps and hits the right combination. I don't remember what they are, but you can, on some devices, swap language.
Right. But the problem comes in because my dyslexia is not like anyone else's dyslexia. It is comparative to me. The reason is I've made my adaptations. And I've worked very hard for them. But you put me up against someone else that maybe hasn't made adaptations. Like when we first started dating, you put some weird ass text on my computer, and I made you take it off.
Okay.
The dyslexia font or whatever.
We were trying to see if that would help you, and I think we did that on your phone.
It may have been on my phone. Anyway,
yeah, I think we set up your phone.
I can't deprogram that.
It's like, well, but it's supposed to help, and you're like, it doesn't.
It doesn't.
It doesn't. Now you've broken it. Like, I know what these fonts are. I know what the words are supposed to look like, and I still had to struggle with that.
Right.
And it's like, oh, finally, I get it. But going back to what I was saying, is working with computers or devices that have been set to a different language. Windows is always Windows. The icons are always the same. The placement is always the same. I don't have to be able to read that language as long as I can remember,
right,
or find a visual reference of where it is.
Right.
And get to a point where I can flop that language back or work on someone's computer. And my biggest problem is if I have to enter a keyboard command.
Right.
Because now I'm dealing with a different keyboard layout.
Right.
And let me tell you, German will F you right up.
Russian F's me right up.
That one would be horrible. I've never encountered that because Russian has wholly different things. Right. German is close enough that you think you're doing good, but if you are a touch typer, and then you have to figure out how to spell a command in a foreign language when the key placements are totally different. And it's suddenly we're all back to hunt and peck.
No.
And oh God, how do I type this when your language doesn't have this letter?
You know what I've had fun with probably about 6 months ago? I had a client in chat whose native language was another language.
No, I didn't study Russian. I studied Russian literature. All of it translated to English.
Right.
All of it translated to English. There would have been no hope.
Right.
Yeah.
I studied some Russian, but that's from reading textbooks. But anyway, I'm sitting there typing, thinking I am making mistake after mistake, and she is following right along. I am like, okay. That was the most impressive shit I ever learned.
Okay.
I think it was in one of the dialects of India. And the translator was not translating that Hindi worth nothing.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, no, Brenda, I didn't. Like, no. Everything I studied was translated. Now, we did have to have some big conversations about some things, and God knows the footnotes on others. Because there's things that just don't translate. Like some words and phrases, if you take them literally, and this is true of all languages, if you take them literally in a literal translation, it doesn't translate. There's either no direct word or no direct thing to attach it to, or you have to know a lot about like the culture or about, like proverbs and things in that language, or for people that speak that language in the area of the world. So sometimes I've run into footnotes that were over a page.
Right.
To try to get you from like these like 5 words it translated one word from, or one word, the one word that it translated into 5 that makes no sense.
Right.
Now has a 1-page footnote to explain what the hell they're talking about. Because otherwise this will never make sense to you. And even if that, have the moment where it's like, huh? Like, I'm sorry, what? Okay, we're going to move on. Thankfully had a really great professor who could go, okay. And he was usually pretty good about pre-warning us. Oh, I think only once out of all the classes I took with him did he ever forget to do it before we got to it. Because he would do assigned readings of like, read these chapters, these pages, whatever. And then before we got to something, he would normally go through and try to help us understand the concept. We spent a lot of time, ironically, in this class talking about like random and like quirky things about like Russian history, Russian life, Russian culture, Russian whatever, because it influenced your understanding of the reading. That if you don't have the prerequisite knowledge of what the hell this chapter, this like one word that has to be translated to 5 that makes no sense and has a 1-page footnote that doesn't help a lot.
Right.
If you don't have all of the background, you're going to get to that point in the chapter and you might as well close the book because your brain's going to be like, what just happened? I don't get it.
Right.
Like, this is a pop culture reference I don't understand. Oh, and it's a pop culture reference from like the 1800s. Huh?
Yeah, they're just talking about the quality of a mirror.
I mean, it like there. Granted, when you get into another language, another culture's literature, that can sometimes be the biggest problem. Is like if there's any kind of like little pop culture reference or historical reference that had a pop culture saying attached to it, those will trip you. And will completely like, and they may have been included by an author that could have said anything else.
Right.
And then sometimes with a translator, it's how much do you want to fuck with the text?
Right.
You could translate this totally differently and or rewrite the book and avoid the problem. Or do you try to keep it true to its original writing and deal with the fact that there's going to be a whole other like culture trying to absorb what you've just done in the middle of reading a paragraph.
Right.
That may be a very pivotal moment in the story, and now it's like, okay, let's all stop and have a history and culture lesson.
Well, yeah, but sometimes that history and culture lesson is so needed when we're looking at Russian lit, especially during the Tsar times, because there was so much, anarchy, malarkey mixed with New Age, and there are so many complex situations there. Any literature written during that time, you're going to need to study some Russian history and understand like how like the Empress Catherine could even take over from her husband, and when she wasn't even a Russian nationalist, she was a German nationalist.
Well, but all getting to the point that you're sitting here, you're reading this, and you're not expecting this.
Right.
And it happens in any language. It's not just Russian literature. It's not just German literature. It's not doesn't matter. Any
Mhm.
literature that you get into, you have to be very careful.
Mhm.
And especially when you're dealing with translating it for
Mhm.
another language,
Mhm.
that some things just, it's really hard to make a good choice.
Yeah.
And why there's sometimes like 5 different translations of a book, and God help you if you bought the wrong one for this class, because you're in
Right.
trouble already. But others are, well, it's close enough. Like, you're going to have a stumbling block right here, but
Yeah.
Because trying to make that decision as a translator for a historical, like a very important piece of literature,
Mhm.
and what do? And how do you make this work across a language barrier, across a time barrier, generations after it was originally written, about a topic and this little piece that is going to blow someone up?
Right.
That everything up to this point they're going to be great with, everything after this point they can be great with, but right here, what do you do?
No.
Do you rewrite the book? Do you write a 1-page footnote trying to explain an entire series of things to give context and understanding and a history lesson and or do you just go, this
Deal
is
with
what it means, this is what it references, and like you do a little baby footnote, and good luck, reader.
Right. Well, it's kind of like the TikTok. If you're reading press from like the 1950s and the word TikTok appears up, they're not talking about a social media platform. Hate to inform you of that. They're talking about time and constraints of time. Literally,
Well,
the
yeah, and
sound of ticking clocks. So,
that's when it starts to switch the other way, is trying to read older works in a modern time
mhm.
that have words that are popular or current or refer to something totally different today
Mhm.
back then.
Right.
Of course, it's also fun when you learn that sometimes we think that we are so modern and dirty and perverted and blah 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 today.
Mm-hmm.
Go
Oh
back
no.
100 years.
Oh no.
Go back 200 years. Go back a few hundred years. If you know what you're reading,
Mm-hmm.
humanity is about the same. We just had different words.
Well, no, I'm
We
telling you, if
just
you go
said it a
back
little different.
200 years into the 1800s and read some newspapers, especially on the 4th year of the newspapers, oh, honey, your grandma porn ain't got nothing on it.
No, but again, you have to understand some words and phrases and what they meant
Mm-hmm.
socially.
Mm-hmm.
That it's not as nice as it sounds.
No, far
Like,
from
there's a
being
lot of things that sound nice that are not.
right. Or even if you took time to read some of the pamphlets from the Revolution, I mean, they didn't leave King George much room to address his manhood.
But you read it today and you don't know what half this means, or what you know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Like, you could read it and think, oh yeah, okay, whatever, that seems random.
Yeah.
And not really understand it, and then just go on like, oh yeah,
Right.
like you totally disregard it, and then only to find out later, oh, you didn't read that properly.
Uh-huh.
You needed to know some additional information.
Yeah.
Because that was a scathing report.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone who read it knew what they were talking about.
Right.
And yeah.
Right. And I'm going to say this: our forefathers in America, especially, they were whores.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so has most of the world been.
Well, and what I mean by that is like Benjamin Franklin did a lot more than flying kites
Oh yeah.
and eating
Oh yeah.
scones in a salon to get
Oh yeah.
funding for the war.
Yeah, there's a lot of nuance to historical figures. Like before you just, like, and again, we kind of whitewash and sanitize history to make it school appropriate for small children,
Right.
because you do, because it's age appropriate.
Right.
But then you run into the problem that because we did that, you have people that are like, Jefferson's the greatest person ever. It's
Oh, please.
Before you get there, there's some other stuff you need to know.
Yeah.
Before you think that Benjamin Franklin is like the greatest person ever, or this historical figure, that historical, before you latch on there, you may want to do an adult search.
Yes.
Because those things you were told in elementary school are true, but they left a lot out.
See, I'll debate the are true.
It's one of those. It's not untrue. It's true, but you like, that's either the highlight reel, or there's a lot of missing context.
Right.
That would put into perspective that this is not the greatest human that ever lived.
Well,
they did great things.
Right.
This is a human. They did great things. They were also human. They also did horrible things. Sometimes with historical figures, it's a bit of a balancing act between whether the good things they did or the bad things they did had more weight.
Right.
And what was the overall, and trying to teach that historically, you tend to do a highlight reel. And it's very narrow, very narrow.
Very, very narrow. And then, a lot of what is history taught today was invented in 1952 to 54.
No, fair.
The whole...
And the effect of, like, the Texas... what is it? The...
Texas instrumentals textbooks.
The Texas, basically Texas creates all of our school books,
right? But
because they're the largest buyer of textbooks,
true.
So they get catered to by textbook companies to print whatever Texas wants to read,
right?
About the past and the present and the effect and what future effects that may have,
right?
About any subject, it is basically written for Texas,
right? Which is falling apart now because it's not being written as textbooks anymore.
Well, it's also become a hell of a lot easier. One, it's not a published book anymore most of the time. Two, the cost of publishing book has gotten a hell of a lot cheaper. And three, with the advent of like digital textbooks and the fact that so many school systems have started to move that direction, it's becoming a lot easier to go, here you go, Texas, here's your whatever version of this book that you want to read, and we can either do a version for every fucking school in the country, because it's digital, we don't give a shit, pay us, or we don't have to have one state's requirements influence everyone else. But there was a point in time in which Texas controlled what you learned.
Right. And then they created Common Core. Common Core also pushes the same narrative. And, 1950, 1943 through 1955, a lot of history was revolted against. What I mean by that is they began hiding it. The most you learn about Benjamin Franklin was, he flew a kite in a lightning storm. You don't learn about his ambassadorship in France during the war. You don't learn about his complicated relationships with his wife and daughters. Because he basically went to France and never came home.
Well, and then you have to question whether that was even complicated given the time period based on the social expectations.
Right.
Again, before you latch onto a historical hero as your beacon of what it, whatever, before you do that, you really need to be an adult and learn about them.
Right.
Because your childhood version of who your hero is and who you most want to be like, a lot of things were left out because it wasn't appropriate to talk to with a child about.
Right, but
like, or more importantly, how long would it take? Because again, like learning, reading literature in a foreign language, there comes a point as in, is this worth it? Like if you had to spend 6 weeks understanding the lifetimes and culture that surrounded Benjamin Franklin before you could learn that he exists and everything that he did, and to then try it, like, my God, you wouldn't get out. You would not get out of elementary school until you're like 30.
Well, if they would actually teach it correctly, and
you wouldn't get out until you're 30.
Well, you'd get out when you're much younger than 30, but you would not have these misgivings. I mean, like Abraham Lincoln being afraid to sleep in the dark alone. Because he was fearful of dying. That's probably worth noting somewhere in there. And then you wouldn't have people coming in with what I will call bullshit history. And it's like, no, he was not sleeping with his armed guard. Yeah. All right, so let's wrap this up before I go into a clinical theory of how history needs to be corrected. Take it away.
All right, so of course we want to thank Beverly Walker, Mika G, Brenda, Joan Owen, Shannon C, Shannon D, Lady Gwendolyn, Caitlin Bell, Devin, Bella, and Maria Meyer. If you'd like to learn more about us, the show, or how you too can become a Patreon sponsor and receive all the wonderful benefits our baristas receive, please visit us at pcspnetwork.com.
Yes. All right, guys, we will see you Friday. Bye, y'all.
Bye.